Welcome back, viewers. I'm Surbhi Unyal and I teach philosophy at Hansraj College, University of Delhi. And we are doing a special lecture series on Introduction to Philosophy for the beginners. And this is under the special segment of symbolic expressions. We have with us Ms. Manisha, who's going to interpret my lectures in sign language. And within this series, we are discussing the introduction to Indian philosophy. In our last lecture, we discussed what do we mean by Indian philosophy, and the term that is equivalent to philosophy that is often being used is darshan. And we discussed what do we mean by darshan and what are the various schools that are there in Darshan Shastra or Indian philosophy. We also discussed that these different schools in Indian philosophy are being divided into two main branches, which are the Astic and the Nastic. The Astic means orthodox schools and the Nastic means the heterodox school. We also discussed that Astic, which is the orthodox school, are those which believe in the authority of Vedas. And the Gnostics or the heterodox tradition are the ones who believe who deny the authority of Vedas. So these two broad divisions signify whether they accept or they reject the authority of Vedas. Now, we discussed that within these two groups, the first group, which is the Astic or the orthodox tradition, there belongs 6 chief philosophical systems. And since there are 6 schools or 6 philosophical schools, therefore it is known as Shad Darshan. And the schools that falls under the Astic tradition are Mimamsa Vedant, Sankhya Yoga and Nyaya Vaisheshik. These are regarded as orthodox or Astic not because they believe in God, but because they accept the authority of the Vedas. And we will see that within these schools, there are schools like Mimamsakas and the Sankhya that do not believe in God, but they are still known as Astic. And I discussed that they are known as Astic because they believe in the authority of Vedas. So we are not using the common usage of the term Astic. We are using the philosophical usage of the term Astic, which means in accepting the authority of Vedas. Among the heterodox traditions, there are 3 main schools that are the materialists, such as Charvaks, the Buddhists and the Jains. These schools are considered heterodox because they do not accept the authority of Vedas. Now let us look at each of these schools briefly and see who were the proposers of these schools and what are some of the central teachings of these schools. So let us start with an overview of 6 Astic darshanas first. Within that, we'll discuss the Sankhya school. So Sankhya is considered one of the oldest schools of thought among the Astic darshanas, which is the orthodox philosophical systems. It is believed to have been founded by sage Kapila before 500 BCE. The foundational text of Sankhya philosophy is Sankhya Sutra. Sankhya is a dualist philosophy that distinguishes between 2 ultimate principles. Those are Prakriti and Purush. Prakriti represents the non-conscious and the material elements, while Purush represents consciousness and the individual selves. So the Sankhya school, basically the central teaching of Sankhya school is that there are two ultimate principles, and that's why they are known as dualist philosophers, because they are considering reality to be twofold. And what are those two ultimate principles? Those are Prakriti and Purush. And in this, Prakriti represents the unconscious material element, while Purush represents consciousness or the pure individual self. The second is Yoga philosophy, which is the practical aspect of Sankhya philosophy. So you can say that the practical aspect of Sankhya philosophy is further developed in Yoga Darshan, which was founded by sage Patanjali. So Patanjali's compilations of aphorisms known as Sankhya Sutra serves as the foundational text of Yoga philosophy. So we often take Sankhya and Yoga together because we can see that both of them share some of the metaphysical and epistemological aspects with each other. And as I was telling you, that Yoga philosophy can in fact be seen as a practical aspect of Sankhya, because Yoga is trying to use it in a practical way. So the metaphysics proposed by Sankhya, where they are talking about the two ultimate principles, Purush and Prakriti, that are being used by Yoga philosophy to see its implications and use it in a practical aspect. So the primary aim of Yoga Darshan is to control and pacify the various modifications or fluctuations of human psyche. It provides a systematic approach to achieve this through the practice of yoga. And we can say that through this systematic approach, Yoga Darshan is trying to remove all the kind of modifications or the fluctuations that are present in human psyche. And the removal of these modifications would in fact take us towards the path of liberation. So the path of liberation which was proposed by yoga was eightfold. So he proposed the eightfold path of yoga, which is known as Ashtanga Yoga, which is a step-by-step process of attaining mastery over the mind and reaching higher state of consciousness. The path begins with moral constraints or ethical principles like yam and niyam, which serves as guidelines for personal conduct and self-discipline. The subsequent stages of the eightfold path include posture, which is asana, breath control, which is pranayam, withdrawal of senses, which is pratyahar, concentration, which is dharana, meditation, which is dhyan, and ultimately culminating in the state of samadhi, which is a profound state of absorption and oneness with the object of meditation. So these are the important teachings of yoga philosophy, or you can say the central idea that is being proposed in the yoga philosophy. Coming now to Nyaya philosophy. Nyaya is a philosophical system founded by sage Gautama, as outlined in his text, the Nyaya Sutra. It is renowned for its emphasis on the science of reasoning and logical thinking. Nyaya system focuses on the nature of knowledge, perception, and valid reasoning. it aims to provide a comprehensive understanding of reality through logical analysis and inference. So, Nyaya Sutra says that there are 4 means of attaining valid knowledge. Those 4 means of attaining valid knowledge are perception, inference, comparison, and verbal testimony. So, we can see that Nyaya Sutra or the Nyaya philosophy is basically a science of reasoning and logical thinking. So, they are emphasizing on science of reasoning and logical thinking, and their emphasis is on you can say epistemology or the nature of knowledge, that how we can attain knowledge. So, their focus is more on epistemological questions on what is knowledge, what are the various types of knowledge, how could knowledge be attained with the help of various means, and to show that knowledge can be attained through various means, they have proposed 4 valid means of valid knowledge, and those 4 valid means of valid knowledge are perception, inference, comparison, and verbal testimony. Now, the related school to Nyaya is the Vaisheshik. Vaisheshik Darshan was founded by sage Kannada. Its authoritative text is Vaisheshika Sutra. This school is atomistic and pluralistic in nature, as the philosophy posits the existence of indivisible and eternal atoms, which they call Pramanus, as the ultimate constituents of the reality. The atoms combine in various ways to form the diverse objects and substances observed in the world. It recognizes the existence of multiple substances, which is known as dravyas, and their inherent qualities, which is the gunas, which together give rise to the diversity and complexity of the universe. And from these 2 aspects, you can see why they are known as atomists and pluralists. So, atomists because they are giving this idea of eternal atoms as the ultimate constituents of the reality. And they are saying that these atoms combine in various ways and form various objects and substances which are there in the world. Along with that, they are saying that there is a multiplicity of substances or the dravyas and their inherent qualities that they possess. And these together, they give rise to the diversity and complexity in the universe, and that's why they are known as pluralist. So, Nyaya and Vaisheshik share some similarities in their metaphysical theories and their epistemological frameworks, though we can see some of the differences between the 2, as Nyaya accepts 4 valid means of knowledge which Vaisheshikas may not. So, there are certain differences, yet the you can say the overall idea is quite same in both Nyaya and Vaisheshik, therefore they are often taken together. Coming now to Mimamsa. It was founded by sage Jaimini in Jaimini Sutra. Mimamsa is hermeneutical in the sense that it prescribes the rules of interpretation of Vedic statements and injunctions. It focuses on mantras and brahmanas portion of the Vedas, which contains hymns and ritualistic injunctions respectively. It places great emphasis on performance of Vedic rituals and the proper understanding of their meanings and significance. Therefore, they are also called Purva Mimamsa, that means the earlier part of the Vedas, where they are talking about the Vedic rituals and ceremonies, how we have to perform them, and various injunctions related to them respectively. Now coming to the other school, which is known as Vedanta. Vedant literally means the end of Vedas, as it places its primary focus on the Upanishads, which are mystical and philosophical texts within the Vedas. Unlike the earlier Mimamsaka schools, which concentrated on the ritualistic aspect of the Vedas, the Vedanta school emphasizes the spiritual and the metaphysical teachings found in the Upanishads, and that's why it's also known as Uttar Mimamsa, because it's talking about the later part of, you can say, the Vedas, where it's emphasizing on the Upanishads. Now, Vedanta philosophy delves into profound concepts such as nature of reality, the self, that is the Atman, and the ultimate reality, that is Brahman. Vedanta represents the final teachings based on Upanishads, which are the crux contemplation of rishis dwelling in the forest. The other two great sources of Vedanta are Bhagavad Gita and Brahma Sutra. The later was authored by sage Bhadrayan Vyas. Together these three texts are called Prasthana Trai. On these Prasthana Trais arose many commentaries giving rise to various schools within Vedanta, which are known as Advait Vedanta or Vishisht Advait or Dvaitvad or Dvait Advait. So one of the central teachings of Vedanta is non-dualistic concept of Advait, which was popularized by Adi Shankaracharya. So Advait Vedanta posits that the individual self, the Atman, and the ultimate reality, that is the Brahman, they are fundamentally one and the same thing, and transcending all the distinctions and dualities that are present in this world. They establish that the Atman and the Brahman, which is the individual self and the ultimate reality, they are fundamentally one, and that's why they are known as the monists or the non-dualist and or Advait. The other school that we had just mentioned were Vishisht Advait, Dvait Advait or Dvaitvad, and they are also taking up these issues into various ways. Some of them are criticizing this non-dualistic position or elaborating it with some more ideas into it, which we will be discussing in some of our later lectures. Coming now to the Gnostic tradition. There were three schools, as discussed earlier, in the Gnostic traditions, who did not believe in the authority of Vedas, or in fact they denied the authority of Vedas. The first one among them being the Charvak school. Charvak represents the common sense philosophy of egoistic hedonism. It is materialist in nature. Its founder was Brihaspati or Charvak, who was the author of the text Brihaspati Sutra. So Charvak is that school of philosophy which is materialistic, because it believes in that it is the material that is the ultimate reality, matter being the ultimate reality, and they believed in common sense philosophy, and also they were hedonists. So the chief doctrines of these schools are that one of the most essential one is that perception is the only valid source of knowledge. So they believe that only perception is the valid source of knowledge, no other source of knowledge can be valid, and they have criticized that in fact. And since they believe that perception is the only valid source of knowledge, the metaphysics is also based on that. That means they believe that only that which can be perceived is the reality. And from that aspect they become a materialist, because only matter can be perceived. Fine, so only that which can be perceived is reality. So they do not believe in heaven or hell. They are materialists. They do not believe in God. They do not believe in soul. They are skeptics. They are hedonists. While Charvak, they also despises the concept of moksha, and hence radically drifts away from the Vedic Astic and the other two Nastic traditions as well. Because as we will see that all the schools of Indian philosophy, they aim towards liberation or moksha or nirvana, while it is only Charvak tradition which do not believe in the idea of moksha, and they believe that death is moksha, or that is the end of life. So that is the only school that drifts away from both Vedic Astic and the Nastic traditions. Coming now to Buddhism. Buddhism was founded by Gautama Buddha. It emphasizes on the pragmatism and focuses on human condition. It rejects metaphysical abstractions and indeed emphasizes direct experience and personal transformation. The Four Noble Truths which are proposed or which are propounded in Buddhism are the fundamental teachings, you can say, in Buddhism. They outline the nature of suffering, dukkha, its causes, the craving and attachment, the possibility of cessation of suffering, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering. And this path is the Noble Eightfold Path. These teachings serves as the framework for understanding the human condition and finding a path towards liberation and enlightenment. The last is the Jain school, or you can say Jainism. It was founded by the enlightened sages known as Tirthankars. Vardhaman Mahavir was the 24th and the last Tirthankars of Jainism, and Rishabdev was being the first. Agam Sutras are the oldest texts of Jainism. The chief doctrines of Jainism are Anekantvad, which is the theory of relative point of view, or you can say the manyness of reality. Saptabhangi Nyaya, the theory of seven judgments. Bondage through Pudgals, which is materialistic, and the karmas. Lastly, we'll quickly talk about some of the common characteristics of Indian philosophy. The first one being liberation. As I was already mentioning to you that almost all the schools of Indian philosophy emphatically declare that moksha or liberation is or should be the ultimate goal of life, except the Charvaks. The second is the law of karma. All schools of Indian philosophy except the Charvak philosophy believe in the law of karma. As we sow, so we reap. There is no escape from the consequences of our actions. Their fruits must be reaped in this life or in future life. The last is bondage. Another common view held in all the Indian thinkers, except again Charvak school, is that ignorance of reality is the cause of our bondage and suffering, and liberation from these cannot be achieved without the knowledge of the reality. Well, there are some more common characteristics in all these schools of Indian philosophy, which we will be discussing as we will discuss different schools of Indian philosophy in our upcoming lectures. But these are some, I felt that some of the very essential ones. So I hope this lecture was helpful for you, and hope to see you in the next lecture where we will talk about various schools in Indian philosophy. So thank you so much.